What is up, guys? Frosty Osty and 0232 here today for another Frosty Features. Today we have another A1. I believe this is actually our first of the P.E.G.A.S.U team. So we have a member of the P.E.G.A.S.U team coming to Marvel Strike Force, and we're going to talk about him today. So if you haven't been to Frosty Features before, what this is a comic book background on the tunes that you use in Marvel Strike Force. And I am the guy who takes you there. So, let's begin. According to Scopely, we rate Scopely's blog post descriptions of the characters that they post at the end. So let's read through it. Controlled by New York native Chris Powell, Darkhawk is an armored alien android of Shi'ar origin, capable of flight, possessing superhuman strength, speed, and agility, and armed with the ability to fire beams of energy and manipulate force fields. Darkhawk combines these powerful tools with Chris's finely honed skills as a martial artist to stand toe-to-toe with the best powered armors in the universe. That's where we're at. So let's get into it. Darkhawk. Name? Christopher Powell. What an unassuming name. But a name of... First appearance, Darkhawk, number 1, 1991. We'll talk about Darkhawk number 1 here in a little bit, but LOL for the comic book community that I hope watches this. Power / abilities. So Darkhawk is an android, is a robot. But sometimes he's not, but sometimes he is. For the most part, it is not a power armor suit. Eventually, it is a power armor suit, but it is a power armor suit that also is its own sentient robot. Because comics, right? So, superhuman in every way, strength, ability, etc. Flight, he's got giant wings, I hope they work. So most importantly that I want to throw out here, we've got arms conjuration. So he is Shi'ar tech. So my X-Men fans out there know who Shi'ar is. It's very, very prevalent in the X-Men universe. So with his Shi'ar tech, so the Darkhawk makeup is Shi'ar tech mixed with magic. So Darkhawk can summon different weapons from different parts of space. So essentially, they teleport weapons to them via, various... I was trying to get my left arm in the action here. Maybe I should scoot over. There we go. So they teleport different arms to them to make different effects. They can generate force fields and projections. So they can create a forceful barrier around themselves, or they can shoot beams that are the same kind of force situation. Also, they have a form of self-repair. This is one of the things I find most interesting about Darkhawk. So, as I said, it's sort of a sentient robot mixed with a human, and they have this amulet that allows them to switch positions. When the amulet is used to switch positions, and essentially Christopher's sentience goes into the android is automatically healed, and they need each other for the healing process, right? And we'll talk about that quite a bit moving forward, but I find that really interesting, and so it is the most interesting healing factor in my opinion. So, there it is. Aliases, Edgeman and Falconer. So, we've got the Edgelord orbs right now on Marvel Strike Force. Edgeman is legitimately a name he goes by in Darkhawk number 1, and he ditches it by the end of Darkhawk number 1, but it's hilarious, and it's very 90s, and we'll explain why that matters in a bit. He also, for a short period of time, goes by the name of Falconer. Also, theoretically, you can say that he goes by Razor, but he doesn't go by Razor. The sentient robot goes by Razor. We'll talk about it. Let's talk about it. Affiliations. New Warriors. Project P.E.G.A.S.U. So, Project P.E.G.A.S.U is on here. It is a result from the first Civil War in Marvel. Darkhawk is actually a part of Project P.E.G.A.S.U, which means this P.E.G.A.S.U team, as far as Darkhawk is concerned, is an appropriate place to land. Good job, Scopely. New Warriors, interesting. Secret Defenders, which is kind of cool that Secret Defenders came out right before Pegasus, or so close to Pegasus, and he actually is a part. He's actually a founding member of the Secret Defenders, and also West Coast Avengers. I wanted to just point that out because New Avengers has recently come out, and West Coast Avengers, New Avengers is made up heavily of people that populated the West Coast Avengers. So it feels like the devs who have been in charge of releasing these last few characters were reading like a single comic book arc and just started picking people that aren't in the game. They're like, oh, okay, I've got these 3 comics, throw them in. Because they're all from the same, like, generalized group in the, like, late 90s, early 2000s, as far as, like, the West Coast Avengers and stuff goes. So, interesting little tidbit. Background, New York, Queens. We got another New Yorker on our hands. That's pretty much it. He is based in New York. He operates in New York. His rogues gallery, more or less, he's got rogues unique to him. Like, to my knowledge, is unique to him. But Talon is like his sort of anti-character. But also we see characters like Tombstone and Hobgoblin and things like that opposing him. He very much, he bleeds heavily into the Spider-Man rogues gallery. So, there it is. Who died? Because you can't be a superhero supervillain without somebody dying. But in the case of Darkhawk, nobody dies. He sort of just comes upon this. He becomes disappointed in his father, and he becomes a superhero. He's one of the rare exceptions to the rule that somebody dies. Okay, so a fusion. So in the creation of Darkhawk, we find that the people who made him, the artists, the creators, and things like that, as you see above, his first issue, he appears in his own first issue in 1991, and he originally was pitched to be a fusion of Wolverine and Batman. If you look on his right hand there, he has the same claws as Wolverine, just because they wanted to make it cool, and he's got the Edge Man, the Edgelord himself, Batman. He's got his own updated sort of bases off the Batman. You can kind of see it with his wings, kind of resemble the cape. Very similar color scheme to earlier, 1980s Batman. So there's a lot there. And then as his development started rolling, they started doing different character designs and backgrounds, and they also decided that his personality was going to be a mix of Spider-Man and the Punisher. So Darkhawk is just a fusion of 4 major characters, 3 of them being Marvel, 1 being DC. And if you listen to those names, especially in the early 90s, you can tell that they are on to doing something specific. And this is the beginning of a new market, and it's really important to talk about this. And this was sort of the joke I was making earlier about Darkhawk number 1. So, in the 90s, the comic book industry, especially at the beginning of the 90s, the comic book industry essentially fully anticipated their big boom, right? And they were correct, but they made a bunch of missteps and weird choices. So one of them was they started mass producing number 1s. So in buying Marvel comics and things like that, a lot of people start off by just trying to pick up, without doing any research or anything, but they just start trying to pick up number 1s. In the 90s, they started giving all sorts of characters, all these brand new characters, number 1s, and they started releasing variant editions of those number 1s and foil covers and all these things, and they start mass producing these different forms of comic books with number 1s, knowing that more people are gonna buy the number 1s in anticipation for them to become valuable, right? Which in some cases is true, in some cases it's not, but the thing is the comic book line in question needs to be a little bit more successful. So a big joke in the comic book buying market is, hey, you should buy Darkhawk number 1. People will be like, oh, Grail book, Amazing Fantasy 15, X-Men number 1, giant size X-Men, and then they'll throw at the end Darkhawk number 1. If you want to get a Darkhawk number 1 right now, it's something like, I was looking at it before the stream, it's something like $15. The big thing being is when you have these really valuable, if it's a big story arc, it's an important character, a big impactful character, and you have their number one, it goes up in value quite a bit when they don't utterly and crazily mass produce the comic, right? If there's only a few thousand copies of that out there, a couple hundred. But in the 90s, they started just mass producing these number ones, completely pulling the value out of these number one, like the potential of this, right? So Darkhawk, not very successful as far as storyline, hasn't been involved in much. It, like throughout the years, really only has a little bit of story behind him. Really, they've been picking it up in the recent years, but as we stand as of this recording date, Darkhawk number one is sort of it's a joke because it didn't necessarily kick off this new market of like selling comic books, but it came at the very beginning of mass producing number ones to try to get people to buy them. Also, with this, they started to reuse their own formula. So people talk about the Marvel formula within the MCU. There is Marvel formulas within the comics as well, and they really started leading into them at this point. So what they tried to achieve with Darkhawk is using Spider-Man's sort of everyman approach, and they tried to mold that into a new character. And with that, using Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery and Darkhawk, he had his one issue and then immediately started doing team up after team up after team up after team up, because in the 90s we were trying heavily to force certain characters down your throats while the people in X-Men were actually doing all the good work, right? That's the 90s for you. So that's a quick general overview on comic book industry from Marvel's perspective in the 90s. Check out my thesis. But Darkhawk's just a fun little anecdote because it is brought up a lot in different forums and Reddit and things like that in regards to comic books. So there it is, the beginning of the new market, and that's where we are now. When we have something that people have faith in, they mass produce the number one, especially from the big two, Marvel and DC. But then you see things in like Image Comics or whatever, and they're not sure if it's going to be successful. Your number ones from those can be a little bit more valuable in the long run than most number ones from the Marvel or DC market. There's comic book stocks with Frosty Osty. So here we are. Alright, so moving on. Relationships. We got Mike and Grace Powell. These are his parents. John and Jason Powell are his little twin brothers. They factor into Darkhawk number one, his story. And then eventually, after Darkhawk loses his powers, like everybody does in the Marvel Universe, one way or the other. After he loses his powers, he becomes like a normal dude, and we see that he has a fiance who is Miranda Cruz. So another thing that I want to point out is when Chris Powell gets his powers, he's only 17, so he is still a kid. He's not quite to the extent of like Spider-Man and things like that. Like, he is almost an adult. But just to keep in perspective with a lot of this, especially with when we do the According to Scopely later, Chris Powell's 17 at the beginning. Very, very Nova-esque. Also big friends with Nova. He's an amalgamation of like every character, but he very much feels like Richard Rider as far as trying to do the Spider-Man formula, becomes this cosmic being, etc. So there's that. Outside of Miranda Cruz, I couldn't find any love interests. My deep well of knowledge for Marvel Comics is actually pretty dry as far as Darkhawk is concerned. So a lot of this was stuff that I went back and read and I had caught up on because I really didn't know that much about Darkhawk. Just complete transparency there. So, notable events: the Raptor Amulet. The amulet in which that gives him his incredible powers. So the way that this works, the Raptor Amulet is so he's 17, as I said, and he's out running around. His dad is a cop with the NYPD and his mom is a district attorney, and he's out with his brothers screwing around at an abandoned amusement park like you do, right? So he's got two little twin brothers, and he's essentially babysitting them in this abandoned amusement park, which nowadays I feel like sounds really weird, but I could totally see when I was a kid in the 90s that would have been something like, I was always like running through the woods and stuff, like unaided and stuff like that. These kids have a babysitter at an abandoned amusement park. I believe it. I have no trouble believing that story. So they are in this abandoned amusement park. They're screwing around, and they come upon their dad talking to mobsters, and they realize that, uh-oh, daddy's in with the mob. What's that mean? And then the mobsters notice them and they're like, oh shit, let's get out of Dodge. And while they're running away, like that's what it looks like when Chris was running before he was superpowered, right? He didn't know how to run yet. He comes upon this amulet, and the amulet gives him the power to change into Darkhawk, where he realizes he has the ability to fly and things like that. But he still doesn't know the full extent of what the powers are. He just knows that all of a sudden, and he thinks it's a power suit, but all of a sudden he is this super strong, flight-enabled, awesome superhero guy, and he's totally about it. So he turns it all around, and he decides that he's going to go after the mobsters that his dad is working with, and then his dad disappears and he doesn't see his dad. As far as I could tell, once again, like I said, the well's shallow for my Darkhawk knowledge. Let me know in the comments if this ever happens. I don't know if he ever actually runs into his father again. I couldn't find it. I could only read so much. So I don't know if he ever does, but his dad straight up disappears and runs away, and then leaving Darkhawk to start fighting all these mobsters. And what we're looking at is the specific mobster in question. His name was Felipe Bazin, which means very little to anybody, but he's working for Hobgoblin. So right at the beginning, we see that there is a relation with Spider-Man there. Also, he's in Queens, so there's that. So he starts taking out these mobsters, and he's having a good time with it, and this is when he's going as Edgelord, right? So after he takes out a bunch of mobsters, he powers down, he figures out how to power down. So what he does is he concentrates in his mind, and he can turn into Darkhawk, and he concentrates back, and he turns back into his human self. He figures out how to turn back into himself, and he turns back into himself, and he's walking through this abandoned amusement park, and he's like, this is pretty cool. I like being Edgeman. Edgelord, Edgeman. And so then a hobo comes out from under a roller coaster. I can't make this up. A hobo comes out from a roller coaster, and the hobo ends up being a big character later. But we're not going to talk about that. But the hobo is an alien that has something to do with the raptor amulet, whatever. But he comes out, and he looks at Chris, and he's like, hey, power's got to be used, not abused by a Darkhawk. And Chris is like, get out of my way, hobo man, I don't need your help. And he walks away, and he's like, Darkhawk's a cool name. It's much better than Edgeman. I'm gonna go with that. So the panel you see here is him legitimately being like, oh, what'd that hobo say? Darkhawk, I'm Darkhawk. And that's how Darkhawk #1 ends, baby. It's good stuff. So, just to give a little bit more, so that's the story. I usually just kind of go on the notable event, but to give a little bit more background, so on the Raptor amulet itself, the Darkhawk android thing, the way it works is the gardener. So I always pitch Thanos Quest. If you go back through Frosty features multiple times, if I can say it, I will pitch Thanos Quest. So in Thanos Quest, he goes and he finds all these different people that are holding the Infinity Gems, right? This is the Thanos Quest, for perspective, it is Thanos Quest to assemble the Infinity Gauntlet and get all the gems, right? So he goes and he fights people like the Champion and the Runner and things like that. And eventually he fights a guy named the Gardener. And the Gardener is the most interesting fight he has, because it really isn't a physical altercation. It very much is this just like sort of sit there and acceptance thing. And Thanos, it's really the only point in Thanos Quest where he like almost doesn't make it. It's not spoilers, because you know he gets all the gems because everything happens. Infinity War can't happen without it. But so he goes to the Gardener. So the Gardener actually, he has this garden of this like super immaculate, it's a whole planet, this garden that he takes care of, whatever. And he plants this thing, and it becomes the Tree of Shadows. And the Tree of Shadows essentially bears fruit, which turns into these 5 raptor amulets, right? And so these raptor amulets, this garden that he's made is within it's a certain dimension, Dark Force dimension, which is controlled, and that section of the Dark Force dimension is controlled by the Shi'ar. And the Shi'ar, for my X-Men fans out there, are an alien, a highly technologically advanced alien race that comes up in the X-Men a lot. The leader of the Shi'ar has a thing with Professor X. So with that, they are using these amulets, and they create this thing called the Fraternity of Raptors, which essentially is they use these amulets to make these androids, and these Fraternity of Raptors are supposed to protect the knowledge that the Shi'ar have. So they're essentially this group of androids that the Shi'ar control, and it kind of gets out of hand an awful lot. But because of the Shi'ar armor, it very much can transform into different things, which gives them the ability to use variant armors. So some of that was retconned in this next thing we're going to talk about. So I called it Razor's Edge, Lord, right? So what this is eventually there's a situation called, there is a comic book art card, Avengers Arena. Check it out. It's a lot of fun, but all that to say, super fast, after Avengers Arena, Darkhawk is involved, and his amulet is damaged, and he loses his power, and he is separated. So this is what I was talking about earlier, and this is where it gets confusing, because Darkhawk it's not necessarily power armor. It really isn't power armor. It's an android, right? So he gets separated from the android, and the android gains its own sentience thanks to Talon. And as it gains its own sentience, it takes up the name of Razor, and it takes off after the amulet's damage, etc. It takes off with Talon, who's another raptor. So essentially, these 5 raptors I talked about before, they all look like Darkhawk in one way or the other. Darkhawk typically has like the red glow on his visor. Talon's got blue, and they started, as the comics went on, Talon started getting like this mane and some other things to like really differentiate. But if you look through some of the comics, they look almost the freaking same. It's really hard to track a little bit in the comics. Without the blue and the red, it's really hard to track who's who. So you got to be careful with that. But so all these people look pretty much the same. So Talon and Razor run off, and they're doing their own fraternity things, and they're like, later, Chris, get screwed. And Chris is like, well, damn, I'm just a regular person. So he joins the NYPD to try to continue to help people. He does on his own. He's a regular person. He's efficient in Kendo. So he is efficient in a form of martial arts, not to a crazy, astonishing level, but without Frosty features context, right? Without his power, he very much is Greg level, is by my own standards, right? So it's really important to think he is not city level. He's not super mega efficient. He's not crazy black belts like Shang-Chi. He is just a dude that knows some martial arts. So he joins the NYPD, and he is enjoying his life, trying to he gets engaged, etc. But then he finds he gets a call to where he has to go out to the Wonderland amusement park, which is where he originally found his amulet. He does carry the amulet on him because it means a lot to him, but it doesn't do anything. Even when he focuses and really tries to bring it about, nothing happens. So he gets a call to this Wonderland park, and obviously he responds because that is where he found the Raptor amulet. And he's sitting there and he's going through memory lane thinking about how he was chased away, etc. And then all of a sudden, these raptors show up and they're like, we're going to kill you, Chris Powell. So if you're keeping a score of Darkhawk storylines, of the 10 that probably exist, I made that number up, of the 10 that probably exist, 9 of them are about people trying to get his amulet from him because his amulet gives him all his power. So as the Raptors show up, they show up with the pure intention to get his depowered amulet. The Raptors obviously would be the people that could fix it. But then all of a sudden, Razor shows up. As I said, Razor being the sentient version of the android that is Darkhawk, shows up and saves him. And Razor's like heavily damaged. He has been damaged. He's not been having a good time. And he's like, Chris, I understand that I said you can F off and then you became a cop, and I'm sorry about that, bro. But listen, I can't heal myself if we're not connected. And since we're not connected, we've also lost our connection to the Tree of Shadows. And without that, the healing thing's kind of a big deal breaker for me. So let's merge back. And Chris is like, I've been a regular NYPD dude for a while now, and it kind of blows. Let's do it. So they merge back and they regain their connection to the Tree of Shadows, which gives immediately lets Darkhawk heal himself, and then we see this android. So the idea being that legitimately wherever the android is when the amulet is used, Chris's body becomes unconscious and it swaps out with the android, and his brain, his mind goes into the android, right? But there's also comics, especially after this merging with Razor, where he does sort of wear it as a power armor suit, but it by technicality, it is not a power armor suit. That's what I want to sell y'all. That's what I want to tell you, folks. It very much, it doesn't have its own AI. It is a sentient being in and of itself because of the magic within the Raptor amulet. It's not just tech, it's also magic. And that's something that we have to keep in consideration. So, they end up re-merging, getting their powers back, and then boomski, we have our Darkhawk again, our Darkhawk 2.0, if you will. So yes, so those are some notable events. He's got a few things that he's done, very much in West Coast Avengers run. He never actually joins the New Warriors, but he teams up with them a lot. Really, if you want to check out some good Darkhawk things, it's typically team ups with other people. Lots of Spider-Man team ups. Is pretty much a cosmic being that lives in New York City. He very much feels like somebody who should be hanging out with Nova more, which he does, but hanging out with Nova more and doing more space stuff. But it's essentially what amounts to this cosmic being, this cosmic kind of cadet type. Because at the end of the day, he is just a sentinel for somebody else's army, right? He's special, but he's not that special. You know what I'm saying? So definitely check out some different Darkhawk things. Buy Darkhawk #1. It's nice and cheap. Definitely look into it. All right, power level. Marvel Strike Force doesn't care about power levels, but here on Frosty Features, we do. And the way that this works, if you are a multiversal threat, you are a threat to all of reality as all of realities know it. You don't just end your reality, you can topple the multiverse yourself, my guy. Universal means that you are a threat to your reality. Maybe you can hop over to another reality and end that one. Cosmic means you are a threat on the small end, on a planetary scale, destroying up to things like solar systems or galaxies with enough time involved. Nuclear means your power is equal to that of a nuclear bomb, meaning that you can level things like small cities up to planetary bodies with enough force. Super Soldier means you are beyond all of the capabilities of a human being. You are beyond peak. You are beyond max. Our baseline here, obviously, is Captain America. You can take out things like a brick wall, or with enough time and effort, something like a city block. City level means that you are a human, but you are trained to absolute peak potential. This is where we see a lot of our secret agents, a lot of our mercenaries, etc. within the Marvel Universe. Greg is the undead Asgardian that hell spawns in Marvel Strike Force, and for all intents and purposes, Greg on his own isn't worth a ton of crap. So, for our purposes, we are saying, due to argument, just because I like it, due to undead Asgardian physiology, Greg is equal to that of a regular human being. So, if I have a bunch of plastic cups from your favorite, fill in with your favorite fast food restaurant from the 90s, because this episode's all about the 90s, a bunch of plastic cups and one of those plastic sleeves with your favorite iconic 90s restaurants on them and a lot of anger and time, I theoretically could take out Greg. So, in the case of Darkhawk, we are looking at, as I said before, without his suit, he's at Greg level, but that's him as Chris Powell, not Darkhawk. In the situation of Darkhawk, as far as power armor goes, yes, it's Shi'ar tech, but Shi'ar tech gets dated really fast in the Marvel Universe. It really isn't that strong of a power armor suit, and it is not power armor. It is sort of an android. Once again, Razor by himself is the same power level as Darkhawk, minus the healing ability, right? He would be at the same level, but he would actually be, Razor is actually at a lower level than Darkhawk because of that one factor. So in the case of Darkhawk, we are looking at a nuclear level threat only for the fact that after he merges back with Darkhawk, or he becomes Darkhawk again, he figures out that he can actually manipulate the armor to change into these different variant armors we talked about earlier. He can summon these different weapons, and some of these weapons are something like a threat on a cosmic scale. So he could theoretically, and I don't think we actually see it in the comics, let me know in the comments if I've got that wrong, but I don't think we see it. He could theoretically level something like a small planet because of the different weapons that he summons, but outside of that, he really is lower end nuclear. So yes, that is it. And if we go to According to Scopely, this one, they've been doing really well recently, and I really thought that their research was going to really kind of, I thought their research had really kind of been on the uptick, but this one turned a new corner, not a new corner, an old corner for me. Made me feel a little bit more confident in the fact that I need to keep doing these. We talk about, so his powers, they barely go into his powers, pretty much say, hey, he's a superhuman that can fly, or his superhuman abilities that can make him fly. Great. That's the whole first sentence, pretty much, other than the fact that he lives in New York. 2 sentences. And, he combines these skills with his finely honed skills as a martial artist. He's a martial artist with a lowercase m. So that's a bit of an exaggeration. I don't know how finely honed we are. We're not Iron Fist. We're not Shang-Chi, right? We're a guy that does more, like, we are a guy that has trained in martial arts some, right? And to my knowledge, it's not even by anybody who, there's not a notable character he learns it from. He just happens to know it, right? So this is essentially a dude that has taken a couple of classes, maybe got a black belt, 1 black belt at some point, but it's never actually discussed. He just happens to know these things. So that's really a stretch. Toe-to-toe with the best powered armors in the universe, implying that Darkhawk is power armor. It is an android that he wears. It has its own sentience. It's not built-in AI. Fine line. You know, we're grasping a little bit, but I don't really think that Darkhawk qualifies as power armor, and I think a few people have noted that. So in this situation, they didn't even try. They didn't. Like, honestly, they left out all his cool powers in the description. They don't really talk about who he is at all, and the complete overstatement about martial art fighting skills. The power armor thing is splitting hairs, but everything else is far enough. They just didn't even look it up, right? So that is Frosty Features Darkhawk. I hope that you all had a good time. Like I said a couple times throughout this, Darkhawk is not a character that I know that well. Let me know your favorite Darkhawk moments in the chat, or let me know if I got anything wrong in the chat, and by that I mean in the comments here on YouTube. So please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything but a couple of clicks, and it helps the channel out so much. I also, as a reminder, stream at the link above on Sundays, 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, where we do Frosty Features live. I hope that you all have a fantastic weekend, and most importantly, stay cool.